Okay, so for me in my studio, there are two types of composing that I do with my students. And finding this balance has taken me a little while, so I want to share it with you guys because really in the beginning, what I was trying to do was somewhere in between the two, and it's been dividing them off that has really given me the success. So once a year, I do a big composing project with my students. This is quite structured, everyone does something on the same theme, and it takes us a number of weeks, like 6 to 8 weeks, not focusing entirely on that for the whole lesson time, but for a good chunk of our lesson every week for those weeks. Okay, so it's a big investment of our time for that period. But I don't try and include proper big composing things like that all year long. And so that investment, that setting time aside for those weeks is really valuable for me and my students. The rest of the time, I like to do something I call micro compositions. And I've recently put these together into little mini books that I've shared. I've shared one of them on the blog, and I've shared with our Vibrant Music Teaching members. And so these two things in balance are what have made composing make sense for me. Because the biggest struggle, as we all know, with many things in teaching, is finding time to do it, right? Composing is so wonderful for your students because it's not just about teaching them creativity. Creativity is awesome, okay? That's a great goal. If that's your only goal in an activity, I think that's fine. But composing can do so much double duty. If your students are learning to compose, they have to learn theory. They have no choice. If they don't learn how to draw notes, nobody's going to be able to read their composition. Now, there's an interesting distinction between the idea of improvising and composing. If you're watching, let me know in the comments what you think the difference is, because I sort of loosely defined it as it being written down or not in my head. Really, what I think is that a composition, if you've composed something, it means you reproduce it almost the same way next time. But there's a fine line there. Improvisation is done on the spot, but it's normally based on patterns and common things that we use over and over again anyway. So there is a bit of blur in that line. Julie said composing is written, improvising is off the cuff. Yes, but doesn't it still count as composing if I remember it? Let's say you have a dyslexic student who, extremely dyslexic, is struggling with reading, and you let them just remember their composition and you write it down for them, but they're not referencing the notation, but they play it the same way every time. Well, they composed that. And it wasn't the act of writing it down that made it a composition. Do you see what I mean? In any case, that's getting into semantics. But for me, improvisation is not the same every time. That's the distinction I'm going to make. And improvisation is something I do in every single lesson. No question, never leave it out because I use it to teach so much of the material. Composing is less regular, but something I've done to bring it into more of my lessons is this idea of a micro composition. Micro composition. So, let's talk about the bigger composing project briefly, and then we'll dive into this idea of micro composition and what it can do for your students. So, the big composing project normally in my studio results in one of these. So, these are the books. Those are the books, or a few of the books, that we've put together over recent years in my studio. And I share these projects on the blog. So last year we did this one. This was actually just shared in a Vibrant Music Teacher chat rather than in a project on the blog, because this is based on a whole online thing. So go back and check out that one of these shows if you're interested in the idea of composing collaborative compositions that are passed between your students in online lessons. That was a really fun project to do, and we still put them together into the book, and you'll see they have like 4 names there. I'm not going to pause on it because, sharing students' names and stuff. But then other years we've done ones where a student just, they just write their own piece and it's on a specific theme. So this year we did fantastic fiction, the one I'm holding up right now. So that was each student chose a story, a film or a book story or character from a story, element of a story, to turn into a piece. So that was a really fun one, and you can find all of these composing projects inside the Vibrant Music Teaching printable library if you're looking for them. Now, we do that once a year, and as I said, it's a big investment of time. I actually have students not just handwrite them, but then take that, if they're, say, over 8 or 9 and not a brand new beginner, I coach them through putting that into MuseScore themselves. They're notating it themselves. So that is not something that you're going to want to do in every, on an ongoing rolling basis, because it just takes too much time. It does. It's valuable and I love doing it, but it does take a lot of time. Let me know in the chat actually if you've ever done one of the composing projects from the site. I would love to hear from you if you have. Julie just said we use fantastic fiction this summer. Love the connection with my students on that one. And yeah, it really helps you to get to know them. So picking these themes is a great way to get inside, their interests and find out what books they love and all of that stuff and build those connections with your students. Oh, that's interesting, Laurie. So she said, I have trouble catching the notes when they are figuring out melodies. I can't write the letters down fast enough. So, first of all, I would make them do it. And I would make them write it down, first of all, if that's possible. But if you are the one writing it down for whatever reason, they're a beginner or you're in online lessons and it's difficult to manage them having them notated on their end or whatever, I would suggest having them translated in some way. So just ask them to say, okay, so what was it you played? Tell me that in letters. Or, my preferred way, tell me that in solfa. It'll give you more time to catch up, but actually it'll mean that they learn more about what they're actually doing. So I make my students figure out what notes they're playing and in what rhythm, as much as possible, depending on their level and their age, of course. When we're not doing those big projects, the balance I found is with this idea of micro compositions. So these are the mini books that I've recently shared in VMT. Let's make it focus. There they are. So there's these tiny little books. They're adorable. And there's a level 1, which is just writing note names, so they don't need to be able to read music for this one. And then the next level, they've got a single stave. So there's an example of one of them. Yeah. And then the next level, they've got 2 hands. So it's like that. All of those have specific themes to do with it, but that's not the only way you can use this idea of micro compositions. So this idea really started with me looking at any new element my student was meeting and using that as an opportunity to teach them, to get them to compose something. I can't do this with every single new element, but it is a great thing to do. And you can pick out, if you want to get in the habit of anything, the key is to do it really regularly in a very simple, formulaic way in the beginning, and then you can get looser with it because it'll be a habit. But if you're just getting into this idea, then I suggest you do it every single lesson as part of their homework or as part of the lesson in the same portion of the lesson. And pick one new thing that they've met that week for them to compose with. So they're going to compose with a new scale. They've just learned G major. They compose something in G major that week. Or maybe they've just learned a new dynamic, fortissimo. So they have to compose something that uses fortissimo. It's very simple, just pick any element. It could even be a rhythm pattern. So say they're in Piano Safari and they learn Zachariah Zebra. Get them to compose something using Zachariah Zebra. Or any other pattern that comes up in their music. I know a lot of my students really struggle when they, which They've already met a dotted crotchet quaver and they're fine with that. But then they get to a dotted quaver semiquaver, which is a dotted eighth, 16th. And in Kadai it would be Timka. And that one can really trip students up in the beginning. They just think it should be so fast, or they don't get the dotted feeling. So having a student compose something that uses that element is going to help them to internalize it and learn more about it. You could also use this for left-hand patterns. Say they just learn Alberti bass or jump bass or that typical Chopin pattern. Anything like that. Take it out of their piece and say, okay, what can you do with this? Another way to use this is to get them to take some element of their piece and decide how it could have gone instead. So almost like a fill in the blanks. Okay, rewrite those 4 bars of that melody, but then take the middle 2 and change them. How else could it have gone there? Maybe you keep the left hand the way it was, or maybe you just do it as a pure melodic exercise. You can see how this can be adapted to so many ways of teaching, so many different elements that you need to teach. So, add your ideas. Let's get a brain trust going. What could you take out of your students' pieces or out of the new material that they're learning that you could get them to compose 2 or 3 or 4 bars on? Add your ideas into the comments. I'd love to read them. Now, the idea behind these micro-composition mini books was a little bit beyond that. It was, how can we introduce creative sparks into our students' thinking to get them to use stuff they already know in new ways and really embed that knowledge. So it's almost the next layer beyond that new element idea. So these all have funny directions, and I think that's why, that's one of the reasons, well, no. Honestly, I think the fact that they're adorable and tiny has gone a long way to how enthusiastic members have been about them so far. But I also think the creative ideas within them are a big part of that as well. So this one is called Jealous, and it says, compose a left-hand melody starting on any note with any finger. Make it sound like you've just heard your friend is going to Disneyland. Right? So that's the kind of thing where I would talk about that in the lesson with the student. And if they say, I hate Disneyland, then you get them to scribble out that word and write in Lego store, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, but you find out more about them as well through the process, and you get to customize it as well. So this is all about creative sparks and having short projects. I originally designed these, the first prototype of them, I guess, when I was going to Australia, which is unbelievable to me now that I was anywhere but here. It feels like, I don't know, maybe it's something to do with living on an island, but I just feel like, oh, I've been here forever, even though I don't normally travel more than this. But anyway, last January, which feels like about 5 years ago, I was in Australia, and I was going to be away from my students for 2 weeks. So I was missing 2 weeks that I'd normally be there, and they knew why it was important for me to go over. They all really value the fact that I invest in my professional development and that I have these opportunities, and they're very supportive of that. But at the same time, I like to provide good material so that parents don't feel like their progress is halted or anything like that. So I created these for that break, and I think that's a great time to use them as well. Have them ready to go, and there's 3 levels, so pretty much all of your students are covered there. You know, even if your student is quite a lot further along, if you give them the level 3, they can do fancy stuff with that. They don't have to keep it as basic, right? So, yeah, I agree. January was 5 years ago. It's official. 2020 has been 5 years long. So far, I think by the end of it, it'll be about 9 years of our lives. Yeah? Does that sound about right to you? It does to me. Anyway, I created these for that reason, and I think that's a great time to use them. You can also use them during regular lessons week by week, but I did this as they can compose one piece every day, and that's a big part of their assignment while I'm away. So they didn't have a lot. They had bits to practice, and they had creative assignments there too, and I used the memorization, mission, and colorful quests for that, but this was really their theory homework while I was away, and it worked really well. So that's a great time to use them, but also on a regular, ongoing basis in your standard lessons. When you're rolling week to week, just do one every week and keep the creativity going. Jen, yes, some islands are smaller than others. Really, we all live on islands, kind of. Technically, I guess I don't, because part of mine belongs to the UK, so. Anyway. So it's still an island, but then everything's definitely an island, so I don't think so. Karen, great suggestion to use arpeggios. Yes, much like the scales I was talking about, doing new endings of pieces as well is a great option. Awesome ideas. So, that's a great idea too, Elizabeth. Using rhythm vocab cards, students sight read for them to compose based on that. That's a great option. So I hope those little micro composition mini books and the ideas I've shared there will give you some food for thought and get you composing with your students more regularly. I want to give you a few tips to make that easier on you, and maybe a few common pitfalls that I don't want you to fall into. So the first tip I have for you is a non-negotiable, especially for your beginners, anyone who hasn't done a ton of composing with you already. You have to compose together at the lesson first. Do not just give them one of these books and say, okay, do the first one at home. 90% of your students will not do it. If they do, they might just write down random notes. They won't even go through a composing process. They won't work it out and test things and see how they sound. They probably, though, won't write anything. Or they'll write it in a way where you can't read the notation. You'll be surprised how even students who can sort of read okay, they can't necessarily write notes. And you'll discover, though, through that process, areas of their reading where there's been a disconnect, and that's why they're struggling with that part of their reading. So it's really, really useful for that fact. But you have to do it together first. You absolutely have to. It's just so important. And with some students, you may have to do several of them together. So don't be disheartened if say you do the first one together at the lesson and you tell them, okay, do the next one at home, and have fun with it. I can't wait to hear what you come up with next week. And they come back and say, oh, I didn't do it, or I forgot, or I don't get it, right? All of those probably mean I don't get it. It was too hard, by the way. Sometimes we will actually forget things, but a lot of time I forget means it was too hard or it looked too challenging for me. So if they come back with that, just say, okay, let's do it now. And just do that over and over. I promise you, once it gets easy enough and regular enough and becomes a habit and they're expecting those assignments, they will start doing it at home. 9 times out of 10 anyway, they will. Do it regularly though in the lessons first. The next tip I have for you for composing in general is to be specific. You'll notice I have themes for these projects, right? I don't say write a piece about anything. I give them a specific theme. And we also go through a very structured process to compose that. So the way we compose in our projects is we do an A motif and then a B motif, and then we put them together in a simple form. They choose whether it's ABAB or ABBA or whatever. We put them together like that. Then they swap things around, move things up and down an octave, transpose bits if they're at that stage. Then they add a left hand, then they add the dynamics and the title if they don't already have one at that stage. That's not to say like, oh, you must compose this way. This is the correct way to compose. That's not what I'm doing there. And if they end up saying, but I really want to include this left hand, then we can start with that, that's fine. But most students need some form of a structure. And so that's the one that works for us, for all of us to follow. So if you're new to teaching composing, try out the composing projects. Honestly, just follow them from start to finish. Yes, it'll feel in a way very uncreative, but it'll allow your students to be creative because they know they're going to be successful within that framework and they know you're holding their hand through it. Then you can get more flexible later. You can try going from the back of the project to the front if you want. But you need a step-by-step process of some sort. The last thing I wanted to say was all along the way, glean as much theory as you can from those pieces that they're creating. Don't let these things go by. Don't let your students just draw their notes whatever way. Talk to them. If they're at a stage where this is reasonable, talk to them about the note stem rules and give them that opportunity to use them in practice. They'll see how their composition looks weird if they draw the notes wrong, and they'll actually want to learn the rules so that it looks better. They want theirs to look professional and beautiful, most of them. So give them that opportunity to learn those note stem rules outside of some worksheet. Right? I mean, who wants to learn note stem rules from a worksheet normally? But in a composing process, most students will be sold on it. Another thing, key signatures, time signatures, working out rhythms, all of this stuff can be learned through that composing process. So just take the time and designate that time to take all the theory you can. Absolutely absorb it like a sponge from those pieces. So let me know what you think of this idea. So let me know if you try something like this already, or if this is new to you, if you're going to try it out with the micro composition mini books or with your own design with elements from your students' pieces. I would love to hear what you're planning to do or what you already do. We're going to switch over to look at a couple of web reviews next, to our web review segment. So today we're looking at Hogan Music Studio and JoliaJensen.com. So let me load them up. I should have a sound effect for this, right? Like a zoop. Here we go. Right. So this is JoliaJensen.com. Note by Note Piano Arts. Please do add your thoughts in the comments as well. I'll just go through the site. When I do these web reviews, I have not been to this site before, so I'm just arriving on it and giving my impressions. So, first of all, it looks like a clean and simple and modern website, which I like. There's a smiling student straight away, which is good. And it's nice and simple. What I don't have is a call to action. Well, I do. I have registered today, but my top call to action is this one. So what I would do, Julia, is I would swap those around or put this here, double it up, because continue is not great. It's obviously leading me to the rest of that post because that's an excerpt. I would write something specifically for this spot rather than letting it be the top part of that post, and then put register today there. Yeah, great photo, and then a bit about you there, which is awesome. And a nice simple menu structure, which I love. Under about, I'm expecting to see you. So I would change the titles of these in the menu. I wouldn't write instructor. That should be the about page. And then the things you have under about should be under lessons or lesson info or something like that. And we've got testimonials. This is an ongoing thing that we see on a lot of these web reviews where the testimonials are on a separate page. It's fine to have that page, but it's much more important that you have these testimonials sprinkled throughout the site, not just on that one page, because I won't necessarily go there if I'm a parent. So sprinkle them throughout, and also if you can, get pictures to go with them of these people. that would be great. That helps to sell the testimonials. All in all though, this is looking really, really strong, so well done on it. I would just adjust that home page and the way you have it set up with the buttons, the menu structure there in terms of the titles, and then sprinkling testimonials throughout your site, and I think that'll be a great improvement. Next we have hoganmusicstudio.com. Another nice, clean and simple website when I land on it, which is awesome. Now, what I don't like is that there's not a lot of content on this first page. So I arrive here and I don't have anything to read. I talk a lot on these reviews about the call to action and big buttons to get people to go somewhere else. But the rest of the people who don't click on that button, they will scroll, they will read what's on your homepage. Also, your homepage is the most important for Google. And it needs to have content on it if you want to rank. It needs to talk about your lessons in your place. So it needs to talk about your lessons in Mountain Lake Terrace, and what they're like, and about you, and just a lot more text. I really like the logo though, nice and simple and clean. I wouldn't suggest having your email address up like that. I would have a button to a contact form. It seems like you have a contact form here. Okay, it's not a form. If you're not getting any spam, it might be fine to have that email up. That would just be the main hesitation with that, is that it might cause you to receive spam, because if that's actual text, which it is, the bots can crawl your site and send you nonsense. So I would just be careful about that. But otherwise, I would, even if you are leaving this, make sure to move the text and make it the same font size. So I'd move this over here beside the other text, or center it all or something, and then make all the fonts the same size and the same font there. We have the lessons page. Okay, that scrolling effect is interesting and nice, but it's quite slow. So I would just caution you against that. Anything that looks fancy but makes the site slower is not worth doing. So just be careful there. Love that you've loads of photos, that's great, and testimonials again. These should be sprinkled throughout rather than in one block, or they can be in the one block as well, but sprinkle them throughout the site. Yeah, see that loading? That does take quite a while, so I just think about that, and whatever website system you're using. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I also think it looks a bit weird full width here. I might narrow that a bit, Lindsay. Otherwise, I think it's looking great. So just on the homepage, way more content and a clear call to action. A button to tell me where to go, how to get in touch with you. And then a little bit of care over the formatting on the contact page. But mostly I would focus on that animation first and how that's formatted to make sure that everything is loading as quickly as possible. So those are our web reviews for today. Thank you to Lindsay and Julia for volunteering their sites. If you want to volunteer your site for a web review, if you think it'd be helpful for you and you enjoy these reviews that we do here on the show, then you can add your details in the Vibrant Music Studio Teachers Facebook group for that. So, just a few notes from me about what's coming up next week. So next week I'm going to be sharing something quite, well, I guess it's composing as well, but it's quite different. So we're going to be talking about an experiment that I've been doing in my group lessons lately. It's not at a stage where I can put together a specific training. I will do that at some point in the future, put together a short training for Vibrant Music Teaching members, step by step, this is how you use it. But it is at a stage where I can share it with you here on the show and some of the experiments that I've been trying in a looser format. So it's called Loop Back. Let me know if you've ever heard of it. what I'm using it for, this is on Mac by the way, but I'm sure there's a similar thing for Windows. What I'm using it for is to record the audio from somewhere, in my case from Zoom, into GarageBand without also recording my audio or anything like that. So it's recording the audio directly in, it's feeding it through, and I can leave out certain things and stream in certain things. So it's controlling that. It's a simple tool. I'm just using the free version of it, but it's been fun to be able to record one student and then layer another student on top and then move things around in GarageBand. Lots of fun experiments that we're trying with that. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. I hope that you're excited to hear about that and that it'll inspire you to try some different things. It's definitely not only applicable to groups, by the way, so it will be useful for those of you only teaching one-on-one lessons. That's just where I'm using it, so that's my experience with it. You could also use it between different students in private lessons, just, with the same file and layering it. But we'll go into all of that next week. If you want to sign up for my daily book bites, by the way, which are the short excerpts that I'm sharing from the book that I'm writing at the moment. It's been a very up and down journey already, and we're only 10 days in. I'm learning a lot about writing here because this is a different type of writing than I've ever done before. So the excerpts are really just about sharing with you what it's like to write a book in general, and maybe specifically this type of book, and hopefully inspire you to try some new stuff yourself, whether that's writing or something else. So maybe you want to get in on those. If you do, you can go to vibrantmusicteaching.com/DBB. vibrantmusicteaching.com/DBB. And if you're not familiar with the site, and you want to become a member and get more fun ideas and get access to the microcomposition mini books, you can sign up at vibrantmusicteaching.com. That's it for today, everyone. I'm so glad you joined me for the show today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some inspiration, and I'm looking forward to sharing some more with you next week. Bye for now.